even the most liberal, well-intentioned white person has a virus in his or her brain that can be activated at an instant. White people are always innocent, and their innocence constitutes their crime.
The riots across America are a highly significant occurrence. Initially triggered by the death of George Floyd, they actually signify a fatal fracture at the heart of the multiracial, multicultural West that has been steadily widening for a long time. Yes, the video we've all seen of George Floyd's arrest is unpleasant to watch, and it's easy to see why it has provoked outrage. And the sort of cop that metes out such treatment to blacks is the same sort of cop that fires rubber bullets at whites for just standing on their own porch.
Oh, there's more. Look at this. They just keep coming.
Oh, go inside! Get inside! Get inside! Get inside! Get in your house now! Let's go! Light him up! Go inside now! Get in the house!
Get in, get in, get in, get in, get in, get in! Get in!
Oh, God, that hurt. You good?
Are you okay?
No one has anything to gain from policing or police officers of this type, and they are on no one's side but the globalist controllers of the West. But what we are seeing in response to all this is the usual opportunistic and violent riots and looting, not protests. If you watch a decent amount of the footage, you will notice that George Floyd features precious little in all of this. And that's because few of them actually care about him or police brutality. If George Floyd had been white, or if the cop had been black, you would likely never have heard his name. His death was just a catalyst for manifesting their real agenda, which is the transformation of the US, the West entire, into an anti-white hellscape. Believe me, I shed no tears when they were setting fire to the banks, which are the biggest poison at the heart of our civilization. But these people do not want justice. They want total anarchy, and they want to see us permanently brutalized and marginalized. If police brutality was the real issue, they would know that whites are more likely to be killed during arrests for violent crime than blacks. They would also know that police officers are 18 times more likely to be killed by a black than an unarmed black is likely to be killed by police.
What did I tell you? What did I tell you? It is not black people. It is not black people. What are you doing?
As ever, the majority of the rioters are non-whites, mostly blacks and Mexicans mixed with some white Antifa. Of course, the communists and anarchists of Antifa care nothing for non-whites. And while some non-whites understand this and have been calling Antifa out, most are only too happy for them to add to the mayhem. But whereas Antifa always has a focused and violent political agenda in such riots, the majority of blacks are just there for mindless anti-white violence and free stuff. The violent abuse of white people that we have seen over the last week is what they want to make the new normal. This is about manifesting in the real world the anti-white hatred that comes from the media's constant pushing of the black victim, white oppressor narrative. We are experiencing their revenge for our endless, unspecified crimes that can never be atoned for. And no amount of fine words, money, or social programs is going to change this. Never has, never will. There will be no grand coming together under the stars and stripes. It's time to get real. For this reason, I believe that separation between ethnic groups is a necessary and inevitable outcome if white Americans are to lead any form of decent life. If the last few days has taught us anything, it is that we cannot go on pretending that all communities in the US can continue to share a single government and territory. Life in the US and in the wider West is now essentially a struggle for dominance between two sides. Those who believe whites should be proud of who they are and remain majorities in their own countries, and the anti-whites who want to see us submerged in baseless guilt and progressively annihilated by multiculturalism. These two sides cannot coexist, ever. And forget so-called conservatism or civic nationalism. To be white but not racially conscious at this point is to effectively be anti-white. But they will all get their reality checks sooner or later, as this video demonstrates.
Looks like they're just finishing up now.
Why are you? We're on your side! We're on your side! Holy fuck! We're on your side! We're on your side! What the fuck?
These fools don't realise that this war is against them, too. If only they cared half as much about the grooming gangs that target hundreds of thousands of our girls. But in this febrile social climate, just one image of white-on-black violence is all it takes to trigger the madness we see now. This is the evil that results from the anti-white agenda. Justice in both the Ahmaud Arbery and George Floyd cases, at least in the anti-white definition of the word justice, can only be served by white men going to jail. I predict their incarceration will happen regardless of the facts of these cases. The fact that Arbery charged the gunman does not matter. The fact that Floyd did not die of asphyxiation does not matter. All that matters is the West is being held to ransom by an anti-white menace that must always be appeased. It is all being engineered to make the West fall. And fall it will. And fall it must if we are to survive. It must fall and something new must take its place. We are now at the point where chiefs of police are open apologists for criminality in the name of anti-white social justice, and they see no difference between citizens and illegal aliens.
And what I love about this man and this man and this man, what I love about this city is that they want people of color to be talked about as being thugs and we're bums and my people, as an immigrant, we're rapists. We know what? We built this country. I got news for them. We ain't going nowhere. We're not going nowhere. The ship has sailed. So if you've got hate in your heart for people of color, get over it. Okay? Because this city is a minority majority city. And this city is a city where blacks and whites and browns and legal and illegal all get together.
Welcome to the dawning of the globalist world order, and as things stand, we are captives of it. Those of us who reject their multicultural nightmare, who were never asked whether we wanted to become minorities in our own lands, what future for us? If this thing we call the West endures, there is no future. Some of them are at least honest about their eternal animus towards us, and yet they still expect us to serve them, to bow and scrape, to bend the knee. But I refuse to live as a second-class citizen in my own country. I will not be reconciled to living in a society where my very existence is seen as a crime.
Excuse me. Hey, excuse me. I work for Black Lives Matter. I'm sorry. I work for Black Lives Matter. I'm sorry that I scared you. But since I work for that company, my CEO has told me to come out today and to bring you on your knees because you have white privilege. So if they see that a white person is getting on their knees, that shows solidarity for the situation. And could you just please apologize for your white privilege? Just apologize.
I am. I'm trying to think of the right words to say because that's a big thing to say.
It's big.
It comes from.
It's large in this country.
I'm incredibly sorry that.
You know, with this country, we have that President Donald Duck, that clown in office. You know, he's brought a lot of bigotry, and you're not a part of it, right?
No, God.
No.
Non-whites can periodically go crazy, empty the shops, burn the city to the ground, and we pick up the tab. They see it as their right to do this, and they always will. But we don't have to live with it. Unlike the debased creatures you see here, I will not grovel to anyone, because anyone who does deserves the contempt they will inevitably get. We have to find a way out of this trap, and the only way to do that is complete separation from them both physically and mentally, and that must now become the main focus of our movement. Initially, people in the US should be working towards informal, self-reliant white enclaves similar to Orania in South Africa, or even like the Amish across the US. These communities are essential to prevent further physical and mental harm to our people, but this ultimately should lead to full and permanent partition into separate states for the various ethnic tribes. In Europe, whose demographic situation is for now less precarious, our focus should be primarily on repatriation and the reclamation of our lands. This year is election year in the US, and it will perhaps be the most significant election in US history. If Trump wins a second term, it will activate approximately half the country into a state of utter rage. All faith in the system of accepting electoral defeat will be lost, and you will see violence on an unprecedented scale, which the state may not be able to contain. Democracy simply cannot endure in a society so polarized. Only ethnically homogeneous societies have a chance of making democracy work for the long term, because only they have sufficient common ground to make defeat at elections acceptable. Multiculturalism is the opposite of that. No one wants the same thing. They just want more stuff for their own people. Whichever way the election goes, white America, as always, loses. The internal contradictions of the US are now simply too great, and white America needs change that simply cannot be delivered at the ballot box. Whichever way we do it, our people desperately need and deserve protection from the unfolding disaster that is the West. We need safe, homogeneous, and prepared white communities. We need, finally, to be free of the diversity lie. Until next time, be well.